What's up guys, Houndish here, and today I wanted to jump in and talk about some awesome builds we can set up in D2 right now, especially those which allow us to get more or less instant or infinite grenade returns, because there is some really strong stuff at the moment, and so we'll touch on Demolitionist in combination with various exotics, aspects, and mods in the game, plus some full builds for all three classes which are really powerful at the moment. And so guys, I hope you enjoyed the video, plus we have to give a massive shout out to my clanmate Duddits, who's always sharing awesome builds. Be sure to check out his channel for some epic setups, which is linked below. And otherwise, let's get into it. Okay, so starting out with Hunters, there's a pretty dope build at the moment that can grant some absurd grenade energy returns, as well as general ability energy and stasis boosts, and set up right, there is a way that we can get our grenades back pretty much instantly. And rocking the Duskfield grenades right here, we're able to get either an immediate energy return if we can freeze enough enemies, but even on individual targets, the grenade energy we can get is pretty wild. And one of the absolute best weapons to support this build right now would be the Deliverance fusion rifle from the Vow of Disciple raid. And this one is able to roll with Demolitionist. My buddy Duddits right here has enhanced Demolitionist, so I believe that improves it by around about 10%. And as you can see in those situations where we get a few enemies slowed or frozen in the Duskfield, the combination of Touch of Winter creating the shard, and then Whisper of Shards boosting grenade recharge rate, plus Demolitionist, it's granting the grenades back pretty much instantaneously. And so Demolitionist weapons in general are really good here, but if you can get a fusion rifle dropped with it, or craft the one from the raid, the grenade energy returns are absolutely awesome and are a big part of the builds we're setting up right here. However, for the rest of the Hunter build, there are some extra mods worth throwing into the mix for extra ability energy across the board and significant stasis damage increases. So looking at the subclass, the Grim Harvest aspect allows slowed or frozen combatants to create stasis shards, and picking them up grants melee energy. But the second really important aspect here is Touch of Winter, which combined with Duskfield grenades grants increased AoE size and creates a stasis crystal on impact. And then the three primary fragments in this build are Whisper of Rhyme, which grants an overshield when collecting a stasis shard, and of course that works well with Grim Harvest, which is creating shards from slowed and frozen enemies. And then there's Whisper of Shards, and shattering a stasis crystal temporarily boosts grenade recharge rate. So that's pairing with Touch of Winter, and the crystal drops on impact. And so these are hugely important to our rapid grenade recharge. Then finally in the subclass, there's also Whisper of Conduction, and that lets nearby stasis shards track your position, and that basically automates them to move towards you, which is generally beneficial to help keep health regen and overshields up with minimal effort. Plus it's worth looking at stuff like Whisper of Chains, which grants reduced damage near frozen targets and stasis crystals, as well as Whisper of Hedrons, which increases recovery and weapon boosts. So there are some extra options, but you can play around with these if you like. Additionally though, there are some other really good mods to help with grenade recharge rate, and on these Renewal Grasps we've got Grenade Kickstart, and when grenade energy is fully expended, we get grenade energy back, which is another boost to the rapid recharge rate. Obviously Renewal Grasps affect Duskfield grenades, and the exotic has just seen a nerf. That nerf is nowhere near as noticeable with this particular setup, but for some it might be preferable to play around with other exotics. And things like Frosties could be a pretty good option too. And so all of those things in combination kind of make up the grenade recharge part, where we're basically throwing that grenade in, getting a few targets frozen if we can, taking them down with the Demolitionist fusion rifle, and then seeing the bulk of that grenade energy come back instantaneously. However, there's way more that you can do with this build by looking at armor mods like Elemental Shards, and this makes stasis shards count as elemental wells, so considering how many stasis shards we can produce via the subclass, it's a bit of a no-brainer, and if you pair it with Elemental Charge, we can get charged with light ×2 when we pick those shards up. And then with stuff like High Energy Fire, we're going to get bonus weapon damage when we're charged with light. And with the amount of shards that we'll naturally pick up, High Energy Fire will be active pretty much all the time. And then it's possible to get more ability regen with Well of Restoration, and picking up a Stasis Elemental Well grants additional energy for the ability that has the lowest energy, and so that's going to boost that melee or grenade recharge even further. And so there are a bunch of ways to really play around with this. If you want to add extras like Bomber, of course it gives grenade energy boosts when using class abilities, it's another good addition. And in this build, on top of getting instant grenades, we're getting health and overshields back, constant charge with light, weapon damage boosts, plus extra ability energy returns. So it's pretty good, and once set up it's pretty basic as well, just tag as many enemies as possible with each grenade, and rinse and repeat. And we can kind of take this idea over to Warlocks as well, so we can rock a very similar setup, again taking the Demolitionist weapon, but also we can look at things like the Osmiomancy gloves, and that gives us an additional grenade charge. Then via the subclass and various mods, we've got options that give us grenade energy back, but more boosts for other abilities, healing and stasis weapons. So in the gameplay right here, once again, grenades are being granted back more or less instantaneously. And there's an option to throw the Bleak Watcher stasis turrets out here as well. So in the subclass, we've got that selected as it opens up the option to use the stasis turret and get class ability energy in return. And then we've got Glacial Harvest, where freezing targets create stasis shards around frozen targets. Then for the fragments, we have Whisper of Refraction, and defeating slowed or frozen targets grants you class ability energy. There's also Whisper of Rime, and collecting stasis shards grants a small amount of overshield. Pretty good one as well is Whisper of Torment, and you gain grenade energy each time you take damage from a target. Plus we have Whisper of Conduction, and nearby stasis shards will track our position. And in terms of mods, much like the Hunter, we have elemental shards on here, and stasis shards count as elemental wells, so the shards being created by the subclass perks are also counted as elemental well pickups, and this triggers Font of Might. So with that equipped, picking up an elemental well matching subclass energy type will grant a temporary bonus to weapon damage of the same elemental type, and so that will boost any stasis weapons by around about 25%, really good with weapons like Reed's Regret as well. But again, we can throw in high energy fire, and while we're charged with light, we gain a bonus to weapon damage, and that will stack with the stasis damage boost as well, so it's a pretty big weapon damage buff on the fly. We also need to have elemental charge on though, and this lets us become charged with light by picking up an elemental well. Once again, since the stasis shards count as elemental wells, the subclass perks will proc this pretty much all of the time. And then another nice mod to run is Well of Restoration, and this gives us additional energy for the ability with the lowest energy when picking up a stasis elemental well. And so as you can see with those mods, it's pretty much the same thing as what the Hunter can do, primarily with that focus being on throwing grenades, killing frozen targets with a Demolitionist weapon, and repeat in the process. But finally, let's speak about Titans for a moment, and with pretty minimal setup, it's easy to get some really tasty grenade energy returns, including without stasis, so Demolitionist once again is doing work here on a Void Titan. But you could easily swap this to stasis and have basically the same setup as the Warlock and the Hunter ones. However, running Void with Armamentarium, we can get pretty similar results. So we're throwing the grenades out, getting kills and suppressing targets, mopping up as many kills as we can with the Demolitionist fusion rifle, but also popping out Barricade, as that's given us an overshield, which also, in turn, is helping to recharge our grenades. And so to set this up, we have Bastion as one of the aspects, and when we cast a super, allies get an overshield, but it also allows casting your Barricade to grant the overshield. And then if we have Offensive Bulwark equipped, anytime we have an overshield or are inside of Ward of Dawn, grenades will charge significantly faster. And that's why we're maybe throwing 1 or 2 grenades out, getting kills with Demolitionist, but also popping that Rally Barricade, as it's all feeding grenade energy back really quickly. Also in the subclass though, Echo of Instability gives us volatile rounds to void weapons on grenade kills. Of course, volatile rounds are still super strong, so it's definitely an appealing option. Then we've got Echo of Domineering, which increases mobility and reloads weapons from reserves when we suppress a target. That's really good if you're using suppressor grenades, obviously. And then Echo of Undermining allows our grenades to weaken targets. However, in this setup, using Armamentarium to get double grenades is once again a pretty key part of this setup. And so we end up running around right here with volatile rounds up all the time, overshield up a lot of the time, and more or less constant grenades, especially when we're cycling those abilities. And since we're using Void Elemental Wells, of course Elemental Ordnance is dropping Void Wells on grenade kills here as well. And then depending on how you want to use the Void Elemental, there are various different options for the mod setup. But really this is more of an example. Again, there is the option to switch to stasis and do a very similar thing to what the Hunter and Warlock can. And there we have it. I thought it was certainly worth a look at Demolitionist on this fusion rifle, as well as some of the builds that can be set up around that. Once again, I have to give a massive shout out to my friend Duddits, who works on a lot of these builds. And if you're after new and interesting setups, definitely go and check out his channel, which is linked in the description below, as he has a lot of cool content. But be sure to give us any thoughts you have on these builds down in the comment section, or any suggestions you have for different ways to use them. If you've enjoyed the video today, a like rating down below really does help us out on the channel. Plus, if you're new around here, feel free to get subscribed and I'll keep you posted with more Destiny 2 content. Otherwise, for today, I appreciate you tuning in as always, and I'll catch you guys very soon.